The Curses and the Covenants, A History Weaver Mystery, Book 2, by Connie Worden, read by the author. Chapter 33. Friday came, and with it the first snowfall of the year. Early November. The snow wouldn't stay long, but that day was cold enough to keep for a while. I'd always loved first snowfalls, but the cold of the day seemed foreboding. It wasn't what I'd been hoping for the Fairchilds on the day of Julia's funeral. The service was being held at the hockey arena as the largest space in town. A packed house was expected. Julia's death had impacted everyone in Beaver Row in one way or another. Hockey season had started, but the Rec Society had gone to the trouble of taking the ice out mid-season as a special favor to the Fairchild family. It was strange to see the familiar rink with no ice, and rows upon rows of chairs where skaters would normally be. The chairs and the bleachers were already filling by the time Ma and I arrived and found seats down at ice level. Everyone wanted to get there early in case of a full house, it seemed. I'd been to funerals that were more like the celebrations of life they were often called, for someone who had died at their natural end after a life well lived to old age. There were many tender moments of joy and laughter, of good memories, mixed with the melancholy. There was nothing celebratory about Julia's service. At any given time there were the sounds of weeping, sniffling, or low sobbing from any quarter of the arena. The Anglican minister offered trite, time-worn commonplaces in the guise of hope. But there was no real note of hope to be found at Julia's funeral. I approached Julia Fairchild in the long lineup of mourners at the door, waiting to offer her comfort, not knowing in the least what to say to her. My eyes were as red-rimmed as hers, but I doubt they could have looked as bleak and broken. The look in her eyes made mine well up again. I opted for saying nothing and just hugging her tightly. "Thank you for coming, Angie. It means a lot," she said, and although I'm sure it was what she said to everyone, she still managed to make it sound fresh and sincere. As I went to walk away and give the next in line my place, Tamara stopped me. "Family and close friends are invited to the cemetery for the interment after this," she told me. "We'd like you to be there if you can. Bring your mom too, of course, if she can come." "Thank you, we'll be there," I told Tamara. I was always puzzled at the regard she showed me and the regard she seemed to think Julia had had for me. But I wasn't about to protest at that moment. I was honored that she had asked me. I'd certainly put in an appearance at the graveside. Ma was tired after the service and wanted to go home for a rest. Seeing she barely knew the Fairchilds, I thought it would be fine for me to go to the burial alone. I dropped Ma off and saw her safely lying back in her easy chair in front of the TV with her eyes closing before I took off for Shepherd's Rest Cemetery by the Church of the Good Shepherd, the Anglican church where Julia would be buried. Even with the cold and snow, the day had developed that delicate beauty that only a winter's day can have. I found a parking space along the laneway by the churchyard and made my way to the gathering of friends and family. I stood at the back of the sizable group gathered around the hole in the ground, only half listening to the Reverend Grantham's words. My eyes were drawn away from the casket and the mourners to the palette of pastel, blending golds with pinks, lavenders, and blues, even a hint of turquoise, being painted against the backdrop of the white winter sky in the early evening of the diminishing day. The bare, black branches of the trees of the churchyard hosted the flocks of waxwings that swooped from earth to heaven, as though one organism with one mind turning on a dime in mid-air. A lone crow called from a distant pine on the border of the grounds. Gradually, without my noticing where it had come from, the awareness of the beauty of it all crept over me and overwhelmed me in an instant. I was suddenly filled with the sure and certain knowing that life was beautiful, pain and all. It wasn't pointless, it couldn't be. Beauty was meaning. If it was beautiful, it had to be meaningful. The world was endowed with the meaning that sang and soared with the birds, and shone with the radiance of the setting sun painting the sky. The breeze that ruffled my hair with a gentle, comforting touch whispered it to me. This is real. This is life. The sureness came over me that my prayer was being answered. I was only setting my feet on the first steps of the journey, but I was experiencing God. Beauty like this in all its glorious felt significance couldn't have possibly just happened into existence. He was there. He did care. He was answering. Whatever uncertainty I still had to live with, I was finally stumbling into one small place of recognizing truth. I had a lot to learn, but I would learn it. I now knew where to begin my search. In asking God to show me himself, I could count on his willingness to do it. I was awestruck. The one who had created all this, and galaxies more, took notice of me. It was all true, and I knew it in a moment. Somehow in her simple way, Ma had accessed the key to the mysteries of the universe. And I could too. "Thank you," I whispered aloud, looking skyward. Then my attention returned to the occasion I was there to attend. In spite of the joy that flooded me in that moment, there was room for an immense sadness as well. The two mingled in equal parts, the one deepening the other, and the other deepening the first. If only Julia could have lived to know what I now knew, if only I'd known it in time to share it with her. October 19, 1898. So busy was I since I last wrote my long sermon to myself in this diary about all the deep truths I was seeing in Genesis 3, that I've been unable even to record the simple daily facts of my life of late. I must add one little verse of scripture to this record to seal off the discoveries that seemed so enlightening to me, the last I wrote of them. The next day, after I wrote about my discoveries of Genesis 3, I happened upon this verse from Psalm 25, verse 14. "The secret of the Lord is with them that fear him, and he will show them his covenant." Perhaps I am at last learning to fear the Lord, owing to the recent sufferings I've undergone. It was that suffering that enabled me to see so much more truth than I feel I ever have before. I've been unable to shake off the suspicion that I have indeed been made privy to secrets the Lord has been whispering into my heart. It seems to me he has begun to show me more of his covenant. And now to the events of my daily life that I must record, rather than simply the life of the mind that I've been driven to write so much of as of late. There was much to do to get ready for leaving my little log cabin in the woods and make the move to Penhurst to stay with Mrs. Lamb and her son, the doctor. The pigs and chickens had to be sold, or butchered and preserved. The house had to be made ready to shut up for the winter. The few little things I could take had to be packed and transported. But that move is now made, and I am settled into my new, for now, home, and made as comfortable as I could be. The doctor's mother is all that is kind and generous. It may be just my longing for my own mother that reminds me of her in Mrs. Lamb's disposition and person. But there is that about Mrs. Lamb that feels motherly to me, although I naturally feel a little ill at ease in a house not my own, and in the company of one I had not met until yesterday. And with all my recent sorrow, I found myself a little unused to civilized ways and polite conversation. But I have been made very welcome, and I believe I will soon find my feet under me, and come to be as happy here as I could be under the circumstances. What I will do after the birth of the baby, I can't be certain, as I don't have the fare for an ocean voyage, and no way of earning money. I've refused to touch any of the money that came from that wretched mine. I feel very strongly about it, and I won't use a penny of it. The only piece of gold I've kept is the sizable nugget that all discovered, panning in Gold Creek, the piece that we kept there in the cradle. And speaking of the cradle, I attempted to return it to the women who helped me in my illness. Imagine my astonishment when they insisted that I keep it for the use of my second baby. I was hesitant at first, but it was a very practical suggestion, as I have nothing else for the baby besides a few of little Ollie's things. And with all my studying from Genesis 3, I've been able to overcome my somewhat superstitious abhorrence of it. Instead, I look on it for what it is, a sign and token of the goodwill and generosity of the people from whom I have it on loan, and my acceptance of their gift of friendship, and my new resolve to return it honourably this time. I'll return the cradle to its rightful owners when it is no longer in use by this common little one. But as to the gold mine, I've asked Joshua, if he could take and use for the impoverished miners' families who were left without work what came from the advancement of income on all share of the mine, which will never be profitable now, as, last I heard, one of the miners went in and followed the vein as far as he could, and it petered out quickly. Not worth the expense and trouble after all of setting up the operation to extract the little gold from the earth, even if there was still a businessman who would take on the cost of financing it. Plans for a railway into Beaver Row are still moving apace, just in a different location than originally planned. Beaver Row is becoming a regular little village, with settlers moving in to farm the valley. It is a little gold mine in its own right, with its relatively temperate climate, abundant freshwater supply, forests of serviceable timber, and acres of flat pasture land tucked away in the midst of its stunning mountain ranges. A veritable Eden. But where my future lies, I do not know at present. I still hope to return to England some day, but I must find some way of earning my own living in order to support myself and my child, and perhaps slowly to save a pittance from my income to prepare for a return to England. No way of earning an income comes to mind. For now, I gratefully accept the hospitality and kindness of my host and hostess, and hope I can make myself useful to them in some way. And I trust that Providence will supply what I need, and show me the way forward when the time comes. Dr. Lamb has asked me to call him Joshua. This feels very informal on such slight acquaintance, but he assures me things are much more informal on the frontier than back in England. And as we are not greatly different in age, and living in the same household, it would be strange to him to hear himself addressed as Dr. Lamb while sitting at his own table with a resident of his own house. So I have acquiesced to the request. From now on, Joshua he shall be,